Teachers are always busy. There's always more to do. But with child protection work, you have to be clear, and everyone in school has to be clear, that it takes precedence over absolutely everything else. So typically you will notice something, or a child will say something at the most awkward time when you're up to your eyeballs in paint. You still have to deal with that before everything else. Send for somebody to cover your class. I know it's sometimes easier said than done, but you can't not do it. You have to take action there and then.
As many as 1 in 10 children may suffer some form of abuse or neglect. Teachers and those who work in schools are playing an increasingly important part in spotting the signs and acting on them.
Schools is absolutely critical. Outside of the family, quite clearly, those people who work in schools, teaching and non-teaching staff, are with children more than any other adult, and are in the best position because of the nature of their work with children and young people to actually see when a child is concerned, pick up the signs that something's happening in that child's life which is making the child unhappy, picking out the signs that a child is possibly being abused.
Abuse falls into 4 main categories: neglect, physical abuse, emotional abuse and sexual abuse. With the help of people who have direct experience, we will look at how you can spot the signs of abuse or neglect and what you can do to make sure it's properly dealt with.
Neglect would be things that you think, wouldn't feel right. Are they coming in late? Are they coming in dirty? Are they not having breakfast in the morning? Are they not having a wash? Same clothes on? But it's a hard one to actually really pin down. So that's when your monitoring would come in. You'd talk to your named person. You'd talk to the previous teacher. Were they always like this? Were they like this last year? Is there any other siblings that there are any concerns for as well? And really this is when the open dialogue plays a big role in really noting down if there's any big changes and going to your named person again.
Concrete suspicions of neglect may only emerge when different adults in schools spot different signs and put them together, often by going separately to the named or designated person.
A recent example of neglect occurred when a 5-year-old girl going into school came to the attention of teachers because she was being bullied and because children were refusing to sit next to her. The little girl was poorly dressed, often appeared to be unclean, and the other children had refused to sit next to her because she smelt of urine, so she was being teased and bullied as a result of that. In this case, concerns escalated when a lunchtime supervisor observed this little girl stealing food from others' lunchboxes. When she confronted her over this, she became very tearful, and although she didn't make a full disclosure as to what occurred, she had said enough that the lunchtime supervisor knew that she had to pass that information on. She spoke to a colleague, and together they went to the designated member of staff. As a result of those concerns within the school, further inquiries were made, conversations took place between the school and children's services, and an investigation eventually ensued.
Schools need to make sure that all new members of staff are trained and are trained early. It's no good waiting until somebody has been in post for half a term or a term, because something might have already happened by that point. One of the most crucial things to get over very, very early is, what do you do if a child says something that makes you feel uncomfortable or shows you an injury that you feel could be non-accidental? You need to know more or less from day one who to go to and what the school policy is.
Signs of physical abuse are perhaps the easiest to detect, with PE lessons being particularly important. Teachers' suspicions ought to be raised if a child tries to avoid PE.
Physical would be obviously something that you can maybe see on the body, noting when they're getting changed for PE, if there's anything that you can see. Obviously, have they told you how it happened? Maybe it would be a chance to, if they have disclosed something, check with a brother and sister, is that what happened? And then if you are concerned, straight away to the named person to follow that up.
case that we actually had was a 10-year-old girl that actually just felt she had to tell somebody that quite frequently her father would shake her very, very violently, push her or bang her against a wall and hit her. She was almost apologetic for father because father only did that when he was drunk. But actually that girl was so frightened of actually what was happening, she had to tell somebody. In this case, the girl told her class teacher. She was the person that she felt that she actually could tell. Unfortunately, again, with the class teacher, that was reported, that was referred to, and child protection procedures were taken.
Although it can be difficult, if a child will only disclose information to the teacher on the basis that it's kept secret, then the teacher must make it clear that he or she cannot offer such a guarantee.
It's very important, though, that if a child comes to you and says, I'm going to tell you something, but I want you to keep it a secret, that you make it quite plain to them that you can't, that if they say something to you that leads you to think that they might be in some sort of danger, then you have to do something about it. Because you care about them, then you have to pass it on to someone who could help. And that then puts the ball back in their court. It might be that they decide, well, I'm not going to tell you then, and you have to respect that. It leaves you with some worries, but you have to respect that the child doesn't want to tell you that at that time. There might be a time in the future when they do come back to you. And having thought about it, think, well, yes, perhaps it does need to be passed on.
Emotional abuse covers a range of things that may happen to a child. It's hard to detect. General unhappiness and lack of confidence can be signs. But often the clearest sign will be a change in the child's behaviour.
For emotional abuse, it would be quite hard to look for. There's obviously no physical signs, but you'd notice slight changes, maybe withdrawn emotionally, change in behaviour, either attention-seeking or withdrawn within the classroom, and maybe just not quite their same usual self. You'd probably talk to your named person about the emotional abuse and say, I'm concerned, what should I do? And then maybe monitor it. Is it over a long period of time? Has it happened the year before? Talk to the previous teacher. Did they have concerns? And really just kind of having open notes, noting down any changes, when, what happened, and really noting down and then obviously going to your named person again.
A recent case involving a 6-year-old girl. Her teacher had become concerned about her withdrawn and rather sullen behaviour, which was unlike her normal characteristics. She tried to engage Mum in a conversation about that. Mum was very reluctant to talk to the teacher. However, during an arts project later that term, the little girl, both in terms of her drawing and painting, was able to communicate and start to have conversations with the teacher about what was going on at home. It transpired that there was an awful lot of violence, that Mum was a victim of that violence. On occasions, the little girl had also been injured. For the most part, though, there weren't any physical indicators of abuse, but the emotional impact of that on that little girl had been very devastating. The teacher quite rightly raised those concerns with a designated person in the school. That was referred on.
Such is the importance of child protection that teachers and others who work in schools should never ignore suspicions for fear of appearing foolish or alarmist.
It's absolutely vital that there is a culture and an ethos in a school in which people are not afraid to say, there's a situation here, I don't know what to do, and that no one is going to be ridiculed or in any way made to feel bad because they don't immediately know the answer to a question. There would be much less point in having a named person if everybody else knew everything to begin with. There is a structure, there is support, it's there to be used.
Sexual abuse is notoriously hard to detect. Surrounded by feelings of shame, children will not always disclose easily. Again, an important warning sign can be a sudden change in behaviour or character.
For sexual abuse, I think the signs would be physical signs of suddenly always complaining of stomachache, not wanting to get changed for PE, but also it could be behavioural. It could be being very withdrawn, it can be attention seeking, crying for no particular reason, getting very upset about things. This is when you'd ask questions of what's the matter, is there anything that's changed? And if you were concerned about something, that's when you'd go to the named person straight away.
Another case that we've had with the NSPCC is a girl who was obviously disturbed while a teacher was reading a story. The story appeared to be innocent. It was about a girl going shopping with her grandfather. And the teacher obviously recognised that something had caused the girl distress. Rather than actually opening the issue up there and then, because obviously that could have embarrassed the child, the teacher found a quiet moment at the end of the lesson to talk to the child, to find out why she was crying. And the child then started to talk about the relationship she had with her grandfather. And what came out was the grandfather was abusing her. The teacher quite correctly reported it through the school's child protection procedures. This case was then referred, and that was a case that led to a prosecution.
Although all cases of neglect and abuse are distressing, teachers and others who work in schools need to stay professionally detached, but remain vigilant.
Child abuse can happen absolutely anywhere. It can happen in any community, in any social class. We are not making judgments. We are not pursuing investigations in school. All we're doing is asking questions, and those questions need to be asked whatever the background. It's absolutely vital that we don't think, it could well have happened in this family because it's that sort of family. Oh, it wouldn't have happened in that family because it's a nice family. That immediately takes us into a situation of making value judgments about different families and different communities. That's not what our job is. Our job is to ask questions in a professional way and to be aware of any possible problems.
One of the things that I think we have been poor in this country at doing is actually explaining to children and young people what abuse is. We still have today where people who work for an SPCC are not allowed to talk about sexual abuse in primary schools. And yet we know from all of our figures that children of primary school age are sexually abused and certainly need to actually grow up with the understanding of what is appropriate in terms of relationships. Fortunately, the good news is that there are increasing number of resources now being developed and are out there for schools that actually can help teachers to be able to do this part of the curriculum. Because it's through the curriculum that we actually give out the real important messages that actually help the child to understand what abuse is.